Long before the first pharmaceutical conglomerates built their towering empires of synthetic dependency, and long before the sterile, fluorescent-lit corridors of modern hospitals became the only accepted temples of healing, a profoundly advanced medical intelligence thrived across the untamed, ancient landscapes of the Americas. You have been meticulously conditioned since birth to believe that before the invention of modern chemical laboratories, humanity was trapped in a dark, primitive age of perpetual suffering, completely helpless against the ravages of disease and desperately waiting to be saved by a patented pill. This is the greatest, most profitable psychological deception ever orchestrated. The indigenous healers of this continent did not merely survive the brutal conditions of the wild. They possessed a deeply guarded botanical technology so aggressively effective that early European colonists wrote terrified, awe-struck accounts of supposedly incurable, lethal diseases vanishing overnight. These native shamans, medicine women, and tribal elders did not guess at their cures, nor did they isolate chemicals to force the body into submission. They communicated directly with the raw, uncompromising biological intelligence of the earth itself, unlocking a vast, hidden pharmacy of wild roots, barks, and leaves that were specifically designed by nature to violently eradicate sickness at its very source. Welcome to Lone Oak Remedies, where we shatter the fragile, synthetic illusions of the modern medical establishment and descend into the forgotten, shadowed catacombs of history to reclaim the stolen, divine alchemy of our ancestors. Today, we are breaking a centuries-old silence to resurrect 10 forgotten Native American herbs, wild botanical titans that possess the documented biochemical power to heal the human vessel from the inside out, completely bypassing the toxic traps of modern medicine. Our journey into this suppressed indigenous apothecary begins deep within the damp, shaded riverbanks of the ancient forests, addressing a profound physical agony that modern doctors blindly attempt to mask with highly addictive, lethal opioids. The native healers understood the deep, aching agony of the human skeletal system, but they did not numb the body into a toxic, unresponsive stupor. Instead, they utilized the heavy, peeling bark of the wild white willow tree. For generations, tribal medicine men would carefully strip the inner bark of the willow during the rushing floods of spring, when the tree's vital sap was at its most potent. When modern science finally investigated this ancient medicine centuries later, they were absolutely stunned to discover that the wild willow was completely saturated with raw salicin. This was the exact chemical blueprint that pharmaceutical companies would eventually steal, isolate, and synthesize in a laboratory to create modern aspirin. But the ancient, unrefined willow bark decoction was vastly superior to the modern, synthesized pill in every conceivable way. When the native healers brewed this bitterly astringent bark into a dark, earthy tea, the raw salicin bypassed the delicate stomach lining entirely without causing the microscopic internal bleeding and devastating gastric ulcers universally associated with modern synthetic aspirin. The raw, natural compound traveled directly through the bloodstream to the liver, where it was slowly and naturally converted into salicylic acid, initiating a massive, systemic suppression of pain-causing prostaglandins. It aggressively hunted down the localized fires of severe arthritis, deep muscular trauma, and agonizing joint degradation, literally cooling the inflamed tissues and restoring fluid, painless movement to bodies that had been entirely broken by the brutal, unforgiving conditions of the wild. Moving from the structural pain of the bones and joints to the terrifying, immediate reality of lethal, flesh-eating infections, we uncover a twisted, vibrant root so fiercely protective that indigenous tribes considered it a sacred, biological guardian of life itself. In an era completely devoid of modern chemical antibiotics, a deep laceration from a hunting accident or a contaminated wound on the battlefield was a rapid, agonizing death sentence. But the indigenous tribes of the deep eastern woodlands possessed the brilliant yellow rhizomes of Goldenseal. This was not a gentle herbal preventative meant for mild discomfort. It was a violent, biological weapon deployed against aggressively invading pathogens. Goldenseal is overwhelmingly dense with a highly complex, intensely bitter alkaloid known as berberine.
When the ancient healers crushed this vivid yellow root into a raw, heavy poultice and packed it directly into a festering, necrotic wound, the biological reaction was instantaneous and profound. Berberine acts as a ruthless, targeted assassin at the microscopic level. It aggressively breaches the protective cell walls of mutated bacteria, rapidly multiplying fungal spores and lethal viral loads, literally melting the microscopic invaders from the inside out upon contact, without harming the surrounding healthy human tissue. Furthermore, when this powerful root was consumed as an intensely bitter internal purge, it swept through the human digestive tract like a purifying fire, violently annihilating the parasitic overgrowths that caused chronic dysentery and systemic immune collapse. It remains a devastatingly effective botanical sterilizer, an ancient earthborne antibiotic that completely decimates disease without destroying the vital microbiome of the host. Venturing higher into the treacherous, freezing altitudes of the Rocky Mountain ranges, where the air grows dangerously thin and the cold pierces the lungs, we encounter a botanical anomaly specifically designed to conquer the suffocating grip of severe respiratory failure. When a modern human suffers from extreme bronchial constriction, asthma, or deep-seated pneumonia, they are immediately handed plastic inhalers filled with synthetic steroids that artificially force the airways open while simultaneously triggering severe heart palpitations and suppressing the immune system. The native healers of the high altitudes relied on a deeply aromatic, incredibly powerful medicine known as Osha root. This profound botanical was often called bear medicine by the tribes because they observed massive grizzly bears frantically digging up the root and chewing it immediately after waking from months of stagnant hibernation to instantly stimulate and purge their suppressed lungs. Osha root is terrifyingly rich in volatile, camphor-like essential oils and profound antiviral lactones. The exact moment a patient chewed this spicy, fiery root or deeply inhaled the heavy smoke of it burning on ancient coals, it acted as a rapid biological defibrillator for the entire respiratory matrix. It aggressively forces the microscopic alveoli, the tiny air sacs within the lungs, to rapidly and violently expand, completely shattering the agonizing, paralyzing grip of a severe bronchial spasm. It instantly rushes massive surges of oxygen-rich blood directly into the starving lung tissue, violently breaking up hardened, suffocating mucus and allowing the patient to take a deep, clear, resonant breath when mere seconds before they were literally drowning in their own bodily fluids. Descending from the freezing, jagged peaks into the dense, humid valleys and ancient river basins, we confront a towering tree that holds the absolute, undeniable cure for the agonizing, burning fires of the human gastrointestinal tract. Today, millions of people suffer in silence from bleeding gastric ulcers, severe acid reflux, and the devastating modern plague of leaky gut syndrome. They are forced to consume synthetic chemical antacids that permanently destroy the body's natural digestive fire, leading to severe malnutrition and chronic immune failure. The indigenous tribes possessed the profound, life-saving knowledge of the slippery elm tree. They did not utilize the rough outer bark, but rather they meticulously harvested the soft, highly mucilaginous inner bark, a substance so nutritionally dense that it was often used as a survival food during the harshest winters. When this pale, fibrous material is crushed and mixed with cold spring water, it undergoes a miraculous transformation into a thick, heavy, gelatinous matrix. As this ancient, soothing liquid travels down a raw, ulcerated throat and pours into a bleeding, highly acidic stomach, it acts as an instantaneous, impenetrable biological bandage. It physically coats the inflamed, torn mucosal linings of the entire digestive tract, instantly neutralizing the searing heat of internal stomach acids. But its true power lies in the fact that it does not merely numb the pain. The heavy mucilage aggressively commands the local macrophages to accelerate cellular tissue repair, literally knitting the shredded lining of the gut back together in a matter of hours. It permanently seals the microscopic internal wounds that allow toxic, undigested proteins to leak into the bloodstream, restoring the absolute integrity of the body's fragile internal borders. Stepping out of the dense forest canopy and into the vast, sun-baked expanses of the open prairies, we find a vibrant, cone-shaped flower that acts as the ultimate master switch for the entire human immune system. While While the modern pharmaceutical industry has desperately tried to commodify, dilute, and patent this plant into weak, ineffective throat drops and sugary syrups, the ancient Plains Indians used the raw, fiercely numbing root of the wild echinacea as their absolute primary defense against the most lethal venom on the North American continent, the bite of the prairie rattlesnake. The raw, untamed power of this wild plant is almost terrifying to experience. When the heavy, dark root is chewed raw, it triggers an immediate, violent tingling and deeply numbing sensation that spreads throughout the mouth and jaw, a direct physiological result of massive, overwhelming concentrations of botanical alkylamides.
These complex compounds act as a rapid response alarm system for the entire biological vessel. The exact moment they enter the human bloodstream, they aggressively stimulate the deep bone marrow to rapidly mass-produce a violent, relentless army of fresh white blood cells and specialized natural killer cells. It forcefully wakes up a dormant, chemically exhausted immune system, commanding it to instantly hunt down venom, neutralize heavy blood toxins, and violently purge systemic bacterial infections from the deepest cellular level. It is a profound biological battle cry, transforming the human body from a passive, suffering victim of disease into an aggressive, impenetrable fortress that actively hunts down and destroys its microscopic enemies. Deepening our exploration into the dark, heavily guarded secrets of indigenous women's medicine, we uncover the twisted, blackened roots of a plant that profoundly alters the human endocrine system. For over a century, modern gynecology has tragically treated the profound, natural hormonal shifts of the female body as a synthetic disease to be managed with highly toxic hormone replacement therapies. These artificial chemicals drastically increase the risk of cellular mutation, blood clots, and devastating reproductive cancers. The ancient medicine women of the tribes possessed a vastly superior, deeply intuitive biological intelligence. They utilized the dark, knotty roots of the black cohosh plant to seamlessly guide the female body through the violent neurological and physical storms of menopause, severe menstrual cramping, and the agonizing, tearing pain of childbirth. Black cohosh is incredibly dense with deep, complex tritopene glycosides and profound, naturally occurring phytoestrogens that act as master modulators within the female endocrine system. When this root is consumed as a dark, heavy decoction, it does not artificially force synthetic, alien hormones into the blood. Instead, it aggressively binds to the body's natural serotonin and estrogen receptors, instantly turning down the volume on an overstimulated central nervous system. It violently halts the misfiring electrical signals that cause blinding hot flashes, permanently dissolves the agonizing, twisting spasms of the uterine wall, and acts as a profound, localized tranquilizer for the reproductive organs, restoring absolute hormonal peace and physical balance without a single synthetic chemical intervention. As we journey further south into the damp, shadowed swamps and mosquito-infested wetlands of the Southern Territories, we confront a towering, intensely bitter herb that the native tribes relied upon to literally break the back of the most lethal, bone-crushing fevers known to early humanity. It was aptly named boneset, a chilling testament to its terrifying ability to cure fevers so incredibly severe, like the devastating dengue fever, that patients felt as though their very skeletons were physically snapping in half from the deep muscular and skeletal spasms. Modern medicine responds to high fevers by aggressively administering synthetic fever reducers, completely short-circuiting the body's natural thermal mechanism to burn out the invading virus, thereby prolonging the illness and driving the pathogen deeper into the organs. The indigenous healers knew that the intense heat of the fever was the actual cure, but they also knew it had to be violently and masterfully controlled so it did not destroy the brain. When they brewed the dried, highly textured leaves of the boneset plant into a violently bitter, piping hot infusion, it triggered a massive, systemic biological purge. The intense bitter principles forcefully stimulated the vagus nerve, commanding the body to push the internal temperature to a highly specific, virus-killing peak. Once that peak was reached, the plant aggressively forced the opening of millions of sweat glands, initiating a massive, sweeping sweat that physically flushed the dead pathogens, heavy metabolic toxins, and shattered viral fragments out through the pores of the skin.
it did not suppress the immune response. It accelerated it to a terrifying, highly efficient speed, instantly breaking the agonizing grip of the fever and leaving the patient exhausted but entirely purified of the lethal disease. Moving from the aggressive thermal purges of the swamps to the hidden, agonizing ailments of the body's internal filtration system, we uncover a low-growing, resilient evergreen ground cover known to the native tribes as kinnikinnick and to modern botany as uva ursi. The human kidneys are the grand, unsung alchemists of the physical body, and when they become severely infected or painfully blocked by jagged, razor-sharp crystallized stones, the resulting pain is universally described as a fate worse than death itself. Modern nephrology largely relies on highly invasive surgical procedures or heavy, synthetic antibiotics that permanently scar the delicate renal tissues and destroy the gut microbiome. The native healers utilized the thick, leathery leaves of uva ursi, which contain staggering, concentrated levels of a profound botanical compound called arbutin. When this dark, earthy, slightly astringent tea is consumed, it travels perfectly intact and safely through the digestive tract until it reaches the highly specific alkaline environment of the human kidneys. There, the arbutin is violently and rapidly converted into hydroquinone, an intensely powerful, localized botanical antiseptic. It acts as a biological power wash, aggressively flushing through the microscopic tubules of the kidneys and down the entire length of the urinary tract. It literally sterilizes the urine as it flows, rapidly annihilating the exact bacteria, causing severe urinary tract infections while simultaneously soothing the shredded, bleeding walls of the bladder. It is a highly targeted, internal cleansing protocol that dissolves the sheer agony of urinary disease and forces the internal waters of the body to run pure and clean once again. As we look beyond the physical ailments to the profound emotional and neurological agony that so often accompanies chronic physical decay, we find a sprawling, intricate vine that produces one of the most stunning, alien-looking flowers on the face of the earth, the wild passion flower. The indigenous tribes of the southeastern woodlands were profoundly advanced in their psychological understanding. They did not separate the health of the conscious mind from the health of the physical body. Today, millions of people are paralyzed by severe clinical anxiety, chronic, maddening insomnia, and the terrifying, misfiring electrical storms of an exhausted central nervous system. They survive only on highly addictive synthetic sedatives that drug the brain into a toxic, hollow haze, destroying memory and cognitive function. The native healers understood that the nervous system requires deep biochemical nourishment, not chemical paralysis. By carefully brewing the leaves and roots of the wild passion flower, they extracted profound, highly complex flavonoids and heavy harmala alkaloids. When this earthy, slightly sweet liquid crosses the blood-brain barrier, it aggressively binds to the GABA receptors in the human brain. It acts with the exact same aggressive mechanism as modern, highly synthesized anti-anxiety medications, but completely without the lethal side effects or the crushing addiction. It violently inhibits the frantic, adrenaline-fueled fight or flight response, instantly dissolving severe panic attacks and commanding a frantic, misfiring brain to enter a state of profound, absolute stillness. It is liquid peace, a biological restoration of the neurological matrix that instantly numbs the spiritual and mental agony of the modern human experience. Finally, we arrive at the absolute pinnacle of ancient rapid healing botany, a feathery, dark green weed found growing wildly at the edges of ancient battlefields, sacred hunting grounds, and modern roadsides, the legendary yarrow. When human flesh is violently torn and deep arterial blood begins to rapidly escape the vessel, the modern human body goes into immediate, terrifying shock. The ancient indigenous warriors and tribal scouts possessed the profound, life-saving knowledge that crushing the dark green, highly aromatic leaves of wild yarrow and packing them directly into a gaping, bleeding wound triggered an instantaneous, violent biological reaction. Yarrow is heavily saturated with a highly complex, aggressive alkaloid known as achillene, a compound that aggressively commands the blood to instantly coagulate. It does not wait for the body's slow, natural clotting cascade to begin. It physically forces the red blood cells to rapidly bind together, creating an impenetrable biological seal over severed blood vessels in a matter of moments. But its raw power goes even deeper than simple coagulation. The heavy, volatile essential oils contained within the yarrow leaf simultaneously act as a fierce, localized anesthetic and a profound antimicrobial agent, instantly numbing the tearing, burning pain of the wound and preventing lethal sepsis from taking hold in the dirt and chaos of the wild. It is an instant, life-saving tourniquet grown directly from the earth, a botanical trauma surgeon that literally stops the shadow of death in its tracks and allows the wounded to rise again. These 10 forgotten Native American herbs are not simple myths, ancient folklore, or outdated superstitions to be mocked by modern science. They are the stolen, suppressed architectural blueprints of divine human health. The modern medical establishment has spent well over a century engineering an impenetrable empire of synthetic dependence, meticulously hiding the undeniable truth that the most terrifyingly effective, rapid healing compounds were already perfected by the earth millions of years ago. They have spent billions of dollars to convince you that your body is inherently weak, fundamentally flawed, and absolutely incapable of defending or repairing itself without their slow, incredibly expensive, and artificial interventions. But the buried medical archives, the diaries of early explorers, and the blood-soaked soils of history scream a very different, undeniable truth. The biochemical blueprints for an indestructible, fiercely resilient, and rapidly healing human vessel are still growing wildly in the forgotten, undisturbed corners of the earth, waiting patiently for you to remember them. By boldly reclaiming these 10 botanical titans, you do not just survive the toxic modern world, you biologically dominate it, taking absolute control over your own cellular destiny. Do not let this vital, life-saving knowledge remain buried in the darkness of forgotten history while you suffer in silence. Your dying cells are desperate for the ancient, divine alchemy they were originally designed to run on. Take your stand against the fragile, synthetic illusions of the modern age and join our fiercely growing, awakened community. Subscribe to Lone Oak Remedies right now, and together let us relentlessly uncover the ancient path to a body instantaneously rebuilt, an immune system permanently weaponized, and a spirit completely and eternally renewed by the hidden wisdom of the ancients.